Welcome to HMG Live.
How are we more responsible with our employees? By making sure that we have created the most, equitable and inclusive workforce, and are taking, actions, not just words, but actions to ensure that we have a workplace where employees can do the work of their lives.
It is time to look at this thoughtfully and really seize on the opportunities that it provides us.
This is an opportunity to change the way we work, to change the way we collaborate, to change the culture of the whole workforce in the United States.
A lot of the decisions that you make may or may not be right at the end of the crisis, right? So you have to be courageous enough to continue to make those decisions very quickly.
The focus now is the fusion of human and technology, and how do we have organizations that are technology organizations, but are human, they're distinctly human.
This will be a time of innovation.
HMG Live virtual summits are offered by HMG Strategy, your global partner helping you reinvent an innovative future of work. A warm welcome to today's host, lead principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon. And welcome to those in the East, in New York, and good morning to those in the West, on the West Coast people that are joining us. I'm Hunter Muller, lead principal of HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today. The 2020 New York Financial Services Summit, reimagining the business and the future of work, what you need to know now. I think we have a world-class agenda in these trying, uncertain times. Nothing better than getting recharged, re-energized, with an hour and a half of thought leadership from your peers, from practitioners, actual practitioners that are delivering world-class value and innovation across the enterprise. So thank you for making it today. It's a pleasure to thank our partners. We could not do this summit, or in fact, the whole HMG platform global network, without you. A big thanks to Illumio, Commvault, Globant, Pure Storage, and Zoom, all powering today's summit. Really appreciate your taking some time to reach out to them, to connect with them, and to learn more about the unique services, software solutions that they're currently providing and delivering. So a warm thanks to the New York Metro SIM chapter, partners of HMG now going on 14 years. Great symbiotic partnership, as well as Bertina Cesarelli from NPower. Bertina, welcome to the program. Can you turn your camera on, please?
It is on.
Awesome. Hey, Bertina, welcome. We've had such a great partnership over the years, helping you forge new markets across North America. I can think of Silicon Valley. I remember early days in Dallas, Texas. You're 4 years now into the role at NPower. What a great program. I'm so proud to be aligned with you all and to have been working with you now, I think, for about 10 years.
That's right, Hunter. It's been a long and fruitful partnership, and we're just delighted with the association with HMG. So thank you.
So Bertina, a little bit about the mission and what you need now from us, from our network of viewers.
Well, I appreciate you asking that. And Hunter, I give you and HMG a ton of credit for perpetuating this series on the future of work, because I think the future of work is very much central to what NPower is all about. The future of work will be diverse, and it will be broader, and it will be more inclusive. And what we do at NPower is we train and skill up veterans and those from underserved communities to take on entry-level tech jobs, but we also reskill and upskill employees so that they can take more advanced roles in areas like cybersecurity and cloud computing. And in fact, just today, Hunter, we're launching the Advanced Tech Careers Collaborative, led by John Miller, who runs cybersecurity at Citi globally, really with the intent of upskilling thousands of NPower alum to take on more responsible roles and fill these gaps that we know are yawning within the tech profession, and will continue to remain open even once we get through a post-COVID environment.
Excellent. And I understand you have some real big news with David Riley at Bank of America.
We were thrilled with an article that appeared in Business Insider just yesterday, and it was really a lovely testimonial on the relationship that NPower and Bank of America has forged over the past really 5 years under David's leadership as our board chair. But they have hired dozens of NPower graduates, hosted our interns, and most importantly, and what we find with so many of our corporate partners, is really engaged deeply in volunteerism, mentoring, guest lecturing, and in a pre-COVID environment, hosting our students for site visits. And it's an opportunity we welcome many companies to become engaged in.
And Bertina, how can people get in touch with you?
So that's very easy. In fact, what I'll do in the chat box is include my email. Anybody can reach out to me directly. We would welcome a consultation on helping you diversify your entry-level tech talent and even your middle-range jobs. We're available anytime and eager to help.
Excellent. Bertina, thanks so much. Appreciate all your help and being engaged with the HMG platform, and good luck with your future endeavors.
Great, very good. Hunter, thank you. Have a good session.
Excellent, thanks. So next up is Brian Brockway. Brian is the VP and CTO of Commvault. You know, Brian, we live in such uncertain times. Today's panels throughout the day will hit on some exciting new ways to reimagine the future of business with increased data flow, access, and trust to adapt and embrace new digital collaboration, mentoring, and customer interactions in totally new ways. And if you don't innovate right now digitally and innovate with your customers, you're probably not going to be in business long. You'd probably agree with that, right? As well, we'll start to increase as we all start to increase our digital dependency, every new advantage also opens potential new risks to contend with. So we asked Brian today to come from Commvault, a leader in data management solutions, to join us to share some perspective on how many of the leading organizations are balancing the new benefit and risk model. Brian?
Thanks, Hunter. Glad to be part of the discussions. Excuse me. Yeah, so I think as you were kind of pointing out, this new digital dependency, so a lot of these great accelerated applications, a lot of this new reimagining of business has fantastic opportunities, but I think the reversing case too is the more digital dependencies you get on your data, you have to start to think more succinctly, how are we going to protect it? How do we make sure it's always going to be available? And how do we also ensure it's protected against some bad actors and bad offenders? We've been finding at Commvault through the years, and kind of made a business of this for many years, of data protection and recovery and kind of moving from data centers into the cloud. A lot of this comes down to much more of a new philosophy around data management. You start to apply that from day zero on your projects, you're able to ensure and kind of de-risk your outcomes against a variety of different problems, whether it's working too quickly and making some agile mistakes. Somebody makes an error, and the error can propagate pretty quickly and pretty widely in some of the new applications. But more importantly, we see these days it's usually also a much higher degree of risk on the business for some outside bad actors. So a lot of the ransomware and malware and other things that are all over the headlines, how do they impact your strategy, and really have you built yourself a solid foundation to come over and protect the business? And these days, these events are not just a couple of laptops, but it's really much more of an enterprise-wide kind of a risk. Accenture did a nice study on it a little while ago, kind of citing probably the starting event starts at about $10 million or $11 million for some of these large malware type events on an enterprise basis. And I'll say, unfortunately, we've helped a lot of customers out through these scenarios, and the overall impact can actually reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars when you start to think about the full scope.
That's a big number, 100 million. Wow. Brian, you've been in our industry for good 4 decades. It's been a lot of different situations. What's the worst case scenario that you see, Brock?
That's a great point. I think while there's many different examples all over the place, I'd probably go back to June a couple of years ago, back in 2017. One of the ones that made the biggest headlines around the world was a global scale malware event called NotPetya. Without getting into too many details, that came out in the matter, and in some cases in a matter of minutes, when it penetrated some of the global organizations, it wiped IT clean. So data systems, applications, everything was brought to basically a dark condition. The initial ranges on that event when it first came out and everybody kind of responded to it was around $4 billion in impact cost. I'll say 2 years later, after everything's been rebuilt and reestablished and all the new controls and everything else inside there, most of the estimates now are coming in at almost like $8 billion. So if you put that into context, in a matter of a couple of minutes, there was an $8 billion event that occurred on a globalized basis and basically knocked people out of action entirely. That's what led, in a lot of cases, to coming back in and saying, do you have a system that is designed to go back and rebuild the enterprise from the ground up? It was one of those things nobody ever architected, nobody ever planned to. And in response, we were rebuilding 20,000 or 50,000 systems over a matter of a couple of days for some customers, so they can go back in and re-engage the business. From our perspective, that really kind of developed into kind of a broader philosophy we like to really use front and center these days, called recovery readiness. So have you designed yourself for these kind of outcomes? Have you used enough automation? Have you threaded security up and down through your data stacks and data copies and all the other cases? And more importantly, have you prepared yourself to go back and respond if you get hit with one of these scenarios come next Monday?
So Brock, this whole readiness concept, it seems kind of intuitive. Is this a new tool or feature that organizations should be engaged with in terms of their data protection?
It starts with some of the tools, but it's really kind of a broader philosophy and strategy. So we kind of look at it, and this was kind of I'm going to call it adapted best practice that came off of a lot of those events with customers. It starts off with, I'm going to say, step one is, how well have you secured your data environment? So have you applied security? Have you ensured that you have some different copies of data located at different locations? So in case one set does get compromised, you have something else to go and fall back into. These are, I'm going to say, a lot of the core foundation steps of coming back in and really modernizing your data protection and recovery type strategy at the foundation. After that, then you get into, it's not just about having copies, but can I actually go back and put them back into full practice? It's the validation steps. The last few years, we've seen more and more organizations come back and say, the only way to ensure that I can recover is I have to go back and prove it to the business. So I have to go back and do some testing. I have to go back and rebuild the applications. And in the older days, it was kind of a DR strategy. Once a year, we all spent a weekend doing. These days, this is much more of a continuous event. That's first two steps, and now I'll go to kind of the, once you have that foundation, then it's all about adding some SLAs, starting to stratify your business and your applications. Everything can't be a platinum level. That would be wonderful, but nobody can afford it. So you have to start to think about, how do we start to organize the business that if we had to go back and rebuild it all next week from ground up, how do we do it in the smartest, most efficient way? And once you have those three pieces together, that's when it really couples together with automation orchestration. Put it into a system, add some intelligence, and you have yourself really kind of a recovery ready type scenario at that point.
So Brock, when we think about Commvault, what should we be thinking about? What's your core sweet spot?
Yeah, so I think one of our sweet spots is we've always been very recovery focused from day one. We've been a data centric strategy and product set that we built through the years. Touch data ones, try to make sure we can reuse it, add more intelligence and security to it. Sometimes you have to be able to flip and transform it. It's running in one format in your data center, and you may have to go back and recover yourself into the cloud for the next 2 weeks to conduct business. How do we make that conversion fast and in line to ensure you can be back up in a couple of hours? You're not going to be, sitting with days and days of outage. So that's been a philosophy and automation that we took through the data centers, across the clouds, and then tied it all back into much more of an automated policy system on the top down. It's really the most effective way to manage risk.
Sounds like some great advice that you're giving there. And you folks have a pretty strong fort with the financial services space.
Absolutely. I'll say not only in the New York market, but also on a global basis. Commvault's really been a trusted piece of the data puzzle for a lot of organizations, large and small, to come back over and say, how do we manage in a cost-efficient manner, ensure you have the agility and flexibility to keep moving into cloud and doing cloud native and other type of applications, but doing it all under a control and a risk mitigation type strategy.
In a cloud-first world, you guys must be busy.
We are. We've been seeing our cloud integrations actually started about 8 years ago. We started teaching our software how to speak to the cloud in a native context, and I'll say the last 3 years, the acceleration and the rate has been on a fast growth rate as more and more are adapting and saying your governance strategy is the same that you were running in the data center on your data, has to follow over and run in the cloud in the same manner.
Hey, Brock, thanks for coming on the program. I know we'll see you again soon. Hopefully you can stay through the whole summit.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to listening to some great stories. Thanks a lot.
How can people get in touch with you?
I will drop my my contact in the chat channel, and I think we also have a nice follow-up download today that goes in, putting a little bit more of this context into some technical details. You can share back with some of the teams and see how well it fits your organization.
Thanks, Brock.
Thanks.
A real pro. Great job. Next up, we have Sigal Zarmi. Sigal is an amazing individual. She's a managing director at Morgan Stanley. Sigal, welcome to the program.
Hi, Hunter. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great to see you. Hey, Sigal, this is a little off script, and you don't have to go there, but I always love to talk about professional context on leadership and career ascent. And you've had such an amazing career. When you talk about highlights of your career and key decisions, what do you want to share with the audience? What kind of excites you most, and what's your mission or passion in the context of being a tech leader?
It is unscripted. I have a passion for technology and process improvement. I always had that. So I think for me, the big thing was always to be curious, to ask questions, to learn about not just what I need to do, but also the impact on the business, and try to see how technology can improve the processes to make customer impact and really help the business do whatever we do for customers in a better way. And I think I got that passion early on when I was serving in the Israeli army. I'm originally from Israel, and I've come across so much bureaucracy and of processes that could have been done much more streamlined. That's where I decided to go into studying computer science, because I felt that with technology, we can really improve processes and make people's life more efficient and effective. And I'm happy to say that I still carry that passion with me 30 years later. And it's just been a wonderful journey to be able to do it for a few amazing organizations.
That's a great comment. We share that same passion. So that's really amazing. You know, when you think of your role at Morgan Stanley, set a little context. What exactly are you doing?
So I'm head of transformation, and I see my role as removing barriers to ensure that my team and the rest of the organization are building the right connections, the right technologies, the right capabilities to straighten us to be flexible and responsive. And COVID have shown us how important that is, to be flexible and responsive and being able to adapt and perform for our clients in any business environment. And we've seen that in spades over the last few months, trying to serve customers while working from home, trying to connect with our teams and lead through a Zoom screen like we're doing now. And that takes a lot of grit and resiliency and leadership on everybody's part, not just the managers in the organization, but really everybody has to step up. So my role is trying to progress the organization, how we leveraging technology in the most effective way, and how do we make sure that our businesses are leveraging technology in the most effective way.
You know, it's a really trying time, really unprecedented, right? Uncharted. How have you used this opportunity and time, this crisis, to drive innovation?
So I would say that a time like that, you're kind of forced to change, and you flex muscles that you haven't flexed before. And what we've seen is that a lot of the collaboration tools that we've had before have not been used as much when people were in the office and getting used to doing things face to face. So one piece of innovation for us was how our business and our employees have taken up to leveraging the tools that we already have and leveraging them in spades. So digitizing some of our manual processes that have been done really fast over the last few months. So for example, signatures on documents, right? You know, if in the past you had to get a real signature, we have automated that in many areas of the business, but not everywhere. So now we rolled it out everywhere, much faster. Leveraging of some of our collaboration tools. People don't have printers at home, and making sure that things that everybody's learning to work from a desktop or a laptop, and not having able to print a document at home has been a change in how people behave. So I think that crisis from an innovation standpoint really drove people's behavior. The other thing that I will say is that we have evaluated our strategic opportunities and really accelerated some of them. So we have accelerating our move to the public cloud and put more power and resources behind that. We think that the experience that we had during COVID have shown us that we can take advantage of the elasticity of the cloud, and that was very favorable to us. So we're going to do more of that. And there are a few other things that we are accelerating and pushing innovation in that way.
So thank you for that. In this purely digital world we live in now, a Zoom world or a Teams world, a video world, how are people leading differently? How are you leading differently? And how are you checking in with your organization? What have you learned?
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody's kind of moved to be the same size box, right? So you feel like everybody equal, but you still have every person has their own unique situation, and that's part of the leader job, is to understand their team situation and what is happening behind the scene, because people have some of them have not been comfortable in putting boundaries between work and personal life. Some of them have constraints on what they need to do as far as taking care of children, the housework, elderly parents, and what have you. So as a leader, our job is really to understand what our people are going through and encourage them to come forward and speak up and be very forthcoming, and also calling out on people, because in face-to-face meetings it's easier for the loudest person in the room to speak up all the time, and as a leader you need to draw out everybody to the table. Same thing happened on Zoom. You have to make sure that everybody's participating, feeling engaged. The one thing that I have to say that was a real, I would say, pleasant, not so much a surprise, but came out, is how the values of the organization are coming to play at the period of a crisis. And I think what we learned is that the importance and the impact of our corporate values and ethics is enable us to really stand strong and unite, even while we are all apart working in different locations. And the values of Morgan Stanley have been so strong and have carried us so authentically through this period, that I think that's why we've been successful in increasing productivity, keeping people engaged, and really making sure that we deliver for our customers.
Are those values in the public domain? Can you talk about any one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 5 values, and the 5th one was just added recently. So our Values are leading with exceptional ideas, so that is driving a lot of innovation. Putting clients first, doing the right thing, and giving back. And the fifth one that we just added was committed to diversity and inclusion. And that value was embedded in doing the right thing, but it wasn't really called out specifically. And over the last month and a half, with all the events in the US, we have added that value because we feel really passionately about diversity and inclusion. And I'm really happy that our CEO, in addition to other action that he has taken, had put that value so prominent between, for all of the employees, because the values of Morgan Stanley are really leading the organization. So that was a very important statement.
Hey, Sigal, thanks for that. When you think of diversity and having a diverse team that drives creativity and the whole go-to-market, what comes to mind and how you keep people inspired and focused and up in these trying times?
I think creativity is diversity, and diversity in the broader sense. In order to be creative, you need the different set of experiences, different ideas, different background, different cultures, different race, ethnicity. All of that comes to play when you want to be creative. And I feel that organizations that have been successful in cultivating that differences of opinions have been much more successful. And especially as we're trying to be an agile organization, when we're trying to drive teams to be more empowered to make decisions, it's even more critical for the teams to be diverse. And the data show that when you are translating diversity to results, you see that in the outcome. So I do think that within our agile transformation, agile at scale, and trying to empower teams on the ground to take action, make their own decisions, and focus on diversity, we get better results. And we have seen that with teams that have embraced those principles.
Sigal, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for coming in. And I know you'll be on the panel here in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mike Mastrole. He's the Senior Director of Sales Engineering at Illumio. Mike, great to see you. Excellent.
Good to be here.
Hey, where are you coming in from today?
Long Island.
Okay, local. All right.
Yeah, out near West Hampton. Yep.
Excellent. So just a little bit of high level. What is Illumio and why now? What's going on in Illumio? Why do you matter now?
So at Illumio, what we essentially do is we basically do segmentation. We create a zero trust kind of infrastructure for the data center. Traditionally, we worked with major financial organizations early back in 2014 that had the basic need to separate some compute or like environments, think like development from production. And essentially we help them achieve that. And that's kind of what we've been doing since then. We also work with other like transportation and other organizations as well.
So a big sweet spot of yours is financial services.
Absolutely. What we've seen there's three reasons why customers basically start segmentation efforts. One is because regulation, and financial services are the most highly regulated environments, right? So they get some external pressure saying segment a payment application or a SWIFT environment or something like that from the rest of the organization. And then we work with them. Other organizations, not necessarily financial services, but other ones, we typically start segmentation as a response to a breach. Ransomware, think something like that. So as Brian talked about earlier with NotPetya, sometimes when that happens, somebody on the board level says, what are you going to do differently that you've never done before? And that doesn't mean they go out and buy a better antivirus or better intrusion prevention system, or they go buy the next gen firewall. They do something variously different, which is segmentation, right? They separate applications so they can create like small blast radiuses within inside the data center. And that's something because, at that point in time, think, if you talk to any one of these legacy security vendors, if you were to say to them, is your product a silver bullet to stop all attacks? They're going to say no, right? So if you think of a virus without a vaccine, the only thing you have left to fall back on is containment, right? And that's essentially what segmentation is inside the data center.
Is it a new trend?
No, but truthfully, people have been attempting segmentation for years, right? So for the last 25 years, what I've seen when I speak to security architects is they traditionally have used network constructs or things like, hypervisors to separate security. And then, they essentially, it works in a very gross kind of sense, but for fine-grained microsegmentation, it doesn't work at all. It's very, very difficult. And most of the customers we speak with, security architects, tell us that they're struggling using virtualization and automation methods, right? So we actually come in and help them using our technology.
Interesting. And how well do you play with all the other layers within the hierarchy of the infrastructure?
Well, we're an overlay model. So irrespective if you have, compute deployed on-prem in the data center, whether it's physical or virtual, if you have stuff running in the public cloud or if it's running on a container, we are a common security enforcement model across all those environments, right? And recently, given our new trends working from home, we've also now entered the endpoint market, right? Because if you see some of the things that I speak to customers about, and our customers actually let us hear, we've seen a tremendous shift in compute where it has now gone into the home, right? So a lot of businesses had basically taken network cable and have extended it into their employees' homes, and then it goes on and off the network, and one day it's sitting in the corporate network, and a few hours later it's sitting alongside their child's gaming computer, right? So the risk profile for the customers I speak with has gone up a lot. So we've innovated throughout this whole stay-at-home process and basically have come out with a product that runs on the endpoint.
Why do companies struggle with the whole process?
Because it's when compute leaves the internal network and it goes into another network, think like a laptop, plug it into going on a wireless network in Starbucks or in somebody's home, it talks to things that employees, really the businesses can't control, right? Because they don't own that machine. So the fact that it sits next to another machine that they don't control, things like ransomware and other kind of malware can get on that machine, and the next time it connects back into the network, there's risk there, right? So it's something that it just makes it more difficult and much more risky.
How do you measure success in an implementation and keeping your client safe and secure with an effective segmentation?
Yeah, so all of our customers, when we talk to our customers, we encourage them to start small because segmentation is very different than what they've used to, right? If you could think, if we go back to mid-2000s, we can never imagine a period of time where there was more than one operating system running on a server, right? Now we can't imagine less than one operating system running on a server, right? So segmentation basically meets that same level of transformation. And what I encourage my customers to do is not let's blow up the data center and just segment everything. Let's start with the crown jewels applications, right? Like what would be the thing that if it was accessed by an adversary that would cause you to disclose in a breach, right? Something like a high profile breach. So we say, let's start small with the crown jewels and then let's work our way outward in some sort of in some sort of enforcement model, right? So, and what we find is that we meet levels of success as we start from the crown jewels and work our way to things that essentially will typically connect to the crown jewels and then work our way outwards from there.
How long have you been with Illumio?
6 years.
6 years. Do you like the culture?
Yeah, the culture is great. I tell you, there's three things here, right? One of our Illumio's values, core values, is we leverage differences, right? So, and we exactly do that. Segmentation, talks to things like load balancers. It talks to things like all the different kinds of servers that you have in an organization, AIX, Solaris, Linux, Windows. And it also talks to other networking devices, think firewalls and things like that, and switches. So, we created a very diverse set of people with diverse set of skills. And we leverage each one of these as we engage with our customers, both in a scenario where we help them, both from a pre-sales perspective, and also when a problem happens, they call into one of our support centers. We really rally around the customer and we rally around each other.
What does customer service look like for you all?
So the great thing is it's around the globe, right? So we have customer service people in many different countries all around the world. And it's a really, really best-in-class organization. I will say, very high reviews and very quick time to remediation. And then nice thing is, even if you don't work in customer success, sometimes you can be reached out to by a customer success person to basically help the customer, and we all just pile right in.
Interesting. Big logos on Wall Street or around the world?
Yeah, if you go to Illumio.com and you take a look at, click on the customers button, you'll see, as a matter of fact, Morgan Stanley is one of our customers. They've been a customer with us when we launched the product in 2014. And there's several others in the financial industry, as well as insurance, media, retail, transportation. We even just had a large transaction with an airline during this pandemic, which is amazing. So it's a clear thing to see that we're solving a big problem that companies are having, especially in tough times.
Excellent. And Mike, again, how can people get in touch with you?
My email is michael@illumio.com. Happy to put it in the chat. You can reach out to me at any time. And then happy to help anybody in, with any needs that they may have.
Hey, thanks for coming on the program, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Hunter, for having me.
Great to see you.
You too.
Okay, next up, Reimagining the Business and the Future of Work, our signature panel here in this new post-pandemic idea. In fact, it's not a new idea. We've been working on the leading, reinventing, reimagining the customer journey now for about 3 years, added in their disruption, and now throw in a pandemic. We really have a different world, a whole different environment, right, that we're in, all navigating, looking to facilitate, enable, and lead innovation. So first up, Marianne Bachynski. Marianne, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Thanks. How are you?
It's been a while.
I know.
New role for you, CIO at AIG. Congrats.
Thanks.
Hey, when you think of the pandemic and how it's impacted your organization and your leadership style, what are your challenges and what are the big opportunities that you've been able to take advantage here?
Well, first off, I actually started at AIG in the pandemic. So, it was an interesting, maybe experiment, if you will, but it was amazing how seamless it was. And I think a lot of people say how difficult that must be, but I have actually found it an incredible opportunity because for a number of reasons. There's really an instant connection, I think, when you speak to people in their homes without the formality of an office. And people are available. They're not traveling or going to a client or on vacation or whatever. And so they're much more available. And I think because no one is in the room, everybody is very, very focused on being focused. So it actually has been very seamless, and, hats off to IT actually around the world who have allowed us all to do this. And it's really, it's really an incredible statement. I think even a few years ago, I'm not sure we would have been able to have all businesses, all schools globally working remotely. And, we probably had a lot of lessons from Sandy and certainly in New York City and 9/11. But planning is always key up front. So we were fortunate enough that we had tested remote trading ahead of the crisis. I'm on the investment side, not the insurance side. So it's actually been really quite interesting. But I also think from a leadership perspective, I don't think my sort of core values on leadership have changed. I think that if anything, it's been proven that they're more than ever necessary. My mantra is really not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you, and removing obstacles, et cetera. And certainly we have a new challenge as a different way of working. But I do think that, things like communication are so critical now. They're always critical, but having effective means of communication and clear objectives and being able to build a community amongst your team is really, just uber important right now. Really answering the question why, what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's the impact of the business, what's the impact to our clients, and that why, I think, also can be very motivating for people. It really brings to the forefront, purpose, frankly, and empowerment to act. Again, we're not together, we're not in the room together, and so really having a culture of enabling people to have enough information to act and get it done. And I think working in cross-functional teams is also a core competency that we need to have, what I call creating the whole brain and bringing around the virtual table all the people you need cross-discipline to make decisions. And again, those types of efforts face-to-face or can be a challenge. So now we have to do it remotely, and we just have to be better and better at it. And I think the communication as well is really critical to address uncertainty. We've all tried to become much better at managing change, and right now we have just so much change, you know, that and it can be overwhelming at times for people. So we really have to work at distilling that uncertainty and providing clarity about what we're doing and where we're going. And Hunter, you always say, every time I come to some of your great conferences, like, this is like an amazing time to be in technology. And you're right, it keeps getting better and better, but I think now it really is one of the most amazing times to be in technology, because we've pulled off this incredible thing of allowing the world to work remotely, but also transformation, digitization, all these things, data, collaboration, all of these things are just being accelerated by COVID. And we've all been working toward it, but it's really more than ever.
Thank you for the great comments, great thought leadership, and thank you for the compliment. I actually think it's probably the most exciting time, probably the most scariest time as well. Hey, Emmy, Emmanuel Hurtado, right? Did I get that?
Yeah, you can call me Emmy. Emmy is fine.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. That makes it a lot easier. Appreciate it. Global head of digital transformation at Globant. Globant's an interesting company, right?
Yeah, we certainly are. Yeah, we've been around for like 15, 17 years. We are focusing on helping our clients to transform through a large scope from strategy design to full implementation. And
so innovating in context with this whole distance aspect, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I was just listening to Marianne, and definitely it's a wonderful time to be in technology, because it has, I think this moment has leveled the playing field for so many companies. Before, maybe a few months ago, you could have the conversation of, I don't know if these aspects of transformation, we can actually do it, or we have a culture that does not allow that for sure. And now we have so leveled the playing field. And right now in Globant, we are so sure that it's coming, a new wave of innovation is coming because of this level playing field, that we will be able to innovate deeper, that there's a new wave of augmented, what we're calling augmented collaboration, which is a lot of focus on how we work together and how technology help us work together, not just using platforms, but really enhancing the behaviors that we have as teams and as communities. And we're so lucky to be part of this ecosystem right now, to be honest.
Emmy, did I hear you say authentic leadership and authentic communication?
Yeah, we are actually calling it augmented collaboration, which we think that technologies like AI and different aspects of technology can really serve a human purpose. The other day we were exploring some of these things, and for example, right now everybody's at home, and it feels like the time in the beginning and the end of the day, they dissipate a little bit, and somebody can put a meeting for you right at the end of the day or at some point. Wouldn't it be amazing also that technology can help us to say, hey, regardless of this lot of time that's free for Emmy, he's been having back-to-back meetings. Why don't you just share this information in another way? Or why don't you choose a more human way to communicate with him? That aspect and a lot of different aspects to build trust between teams, which we truly believe that it's important to be productive and to be effective, is something that we truly are working towards and using technology to really augment our capacities, for sure.
Emmy, brilliant comments. Stay with us here. I'll circle back to you here in a minute. Hey, Paul, welcome to the program. Paul Ferraro. He's the VP of Worldwide Go-to-Market at Pure Storage. Great partner of HMG's. Thanks for your support, and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Hey, tell us a little bit about the usership economy and how the world has changed.
The usership economy has been evolving for many, many years. The ability from a utility perspective to consume electricity, water, gas, and those plays were generally just volume-based. But as the world continued to evolve, we find ourselves being able to retreat back into our homes when there's a pandemic or geopolitical unrest or a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. Technology and on-demand models, essentially the usership economy, has allowed us to consume all of these things non-disruptively, regardless of what the circumstances may be. So the world has changed quite considerably. And if you look at the automobile industry, they're more interested in the experience, the total experience of the traveler. And at Pure, we're interested in the total experience and that modern data experience for the data, as well as for our customer.
Well, data matters, right, Paul?
Data is the new oil. It's the new oil.
Yep, I saw that article, love it. When you think of what Pure really does at the core, give us 30 seconds on what you actually do in the data center.
So we dramatically simplify the overall management. So the key to Pure is we've transformed and we have rethought what data services, the common data services platform is. In the past, you would consume or acquire technology and use it for a few years, and that capability would become legacy or become tech debt. And you'd have to then refresh and move your data again to the next destination. At Pure, we've completely changed the game. We provide a technology that's constantly innovating over 10 years. So there's no need to essentially migrate your data elsewhere. Our technology runs in the cloud, it runs in the colo, it runs on-prem. And our technology is a unified operating model. So our operating system and platform is all consistent from an API perspective. And further, to the point of the usership economy, we offer subscription models that are unified. So the unification of the operating model, the user experience, and the way that you consume and you pay for those services. So we've dramatically rethought storage services, and we've simplified the overall day-to-day management. Most importantly, we've de-risked financial services to a very large degree. Because if you look at 55 to maybe 75% of all service disruptions that occur are a result of a human interfacing with infrastructure and causing an outage. So we've greatly reduced the need for the human to interface with the technology, dramatically improving and increasing uptime of services. Because many financial services, they're always assessing risk, all of them are always assessing risks. And the risk of making a change, the risk of moving to the cloud, the risk of making a change during a transformational program, we dramatically reduce that risk because our technology is always available and extremely simple to manage, and it's all API driven.
Excellent. Paul, thanks for being on the program. We'll circle back to you here in a minute. Sigal, welcome back. Hey, Sigal, in these challenging times, what does winning look like for your team and your company?
Well, I think it's the same. It's really serving our customers and clients, if they're internal clients or external clients. We also work with some external clients, our team working with them directly. I think it's engaging our employees. Amy was talking about building trust. I actually think that this whole environment of working from home is helping us building trust. We're kind of inviting everybody into our house, and we see the kids and the pets and the bedrooms and the kitchens of everybody. And I think that is building trust, and the focus on building trust and keeping the engagement of employees is winning as well. Of course, keeping everybody healthy and finding the right, I would say, protocols and procedures to get people safely back to work in the office. So the whole return to work has been more challenging than actually going remotely, because we went remotely kind of overnight, but we are going to bring people back in stages, and making sure that we do that in the right way, safe way, and people feeling comfortable that we are listening to them and their personal needs at this time is important. And, continuing delivering all the goals. Every year we have the goals from our chairman, the goals for technology and operation, goals for the business, and just delivering on those goals.
It's great, well said, Sigal. It's often said in order to really get true innovation, you need to starve off resources. So really change a model or cut back resources, because then the creativity is really accentuated and you come up with a new idea, that new idea of jumping off that burning platform. Do you believe in that as well?
I think it's more than just starving resources. I think it's more about enforcing change. So by starving resources, you are kind of introducing change into the system, and you say you have less resources, let's think about something else creatively. I think the same happens here. You're introducing the change of people working from home, and that does create new ideas and new discussions, and from that we'll see innovation. I agree with what was said earlier. We are at the brink of seeing a ton of innovation around the way we work, the way we interact with each other, the way we travel, the way we deliver, the goals of the company. You see a lot of companies are standing up, not just for being profitable and delivering for shareholders. They are standing up for diversity and inclusion. They're standing up for safety of their employees. A lot of companies have also said they're not going to lay off people. They're really thinking about their place in the social fabric of our world. And I think it's just amazing to see that. So there is going to be a lot of innovation. And there are never enough resources to do everything you want to do. I mean, that's just a given. I think the human mind is so incredible. It always have so many ideas and so many new things that that we can all think and dream about. And there are never enough resources. So getting the most out of the resources and automating as much as possible so you can free up people to think about creative ways to do their job. I think that's we will see that going forward.
Thank you, Sigal. Excellent points. Hey, Marianne, I know tech leaders that said we put in all of the collaboration tools, we put in all of the video platforms, we begged people to use them. People for years still hopped on planes, they flew for in-person meetings. Pandemic hits, now all of a sudden we're at 90, 100% utilization. What was your experience? What do you see in your current environment?
I think it's been a real learning experience for everybody because they're realizing. I don't think we'll go back. I really don't. I think we're realizing how effective you can be in being in multiple locations. Certainly, it's not going to never be face to face. But I think, and I think ironically, we're probably more electronically face-to-face than sometimes we are in the office, where you don't necessarily go down the hall, you don't necessarily go to another building in New York, you do it over the phone, or you're a global company, so you're different time zones, etc. So people are used to working that way in a sense, but I think the discipline that has been learned by everybody being remote at the same time around focus and running effective meetings, I think will stick. And I don't know. I just haven't found it as difficult as people expected, because I think we've kind of maybe it's IT people, but more than business, but we've been working that way for a long time. And I think, in the old days when people started working remote and you were the only one not in the room, that's a totally different dynamic. Right. And I also think video is one of the slowest things, and now video is capable of supporting. So the assumption should be there's always going to be people on video.
Right. Very true. And I know you're passionate about women in IT and women as a CIO.
Yeah, I think it's obviously been like a lifetime passion for me. And in some ways, I think we've made tremendous progress. In some ways, I have a daughter who's a data scientist at Instagram who still sometimes is the only woman in the room, so it's that could be disheartening, but I think that this next generation is phenomenal. And I think one of the most positive things about social media is the ability to create community. And I think that, there's just been tremendous momentum around that with the ability of women to come together, and I think when asked advice from women, a lot of it is not gender specific, right? It's about managing your career. And I think one thing that, for whatever reason, women need to really focus on is building their core competency. What is their core skill? Because that's the foundation of which you build your career, and that you always need to be progressing with that, and you always need to stay relevant. But again, I don't consider that necessarily gender specific, but I think it's very critical not to take on roles that are ill-defined or not getting you to where you want to get to in your career, and always kind of staying focused on that. And I also think that mentorships has always been very critical, but the concept of a sponsor is a newer concept, which I think is terrific because it's about having an advocate in the room that can represent you. I always say promotions are not a surprise party. They're a project, you know, and you need to figure out if you're in a promotable role, if you have the skills and work your way toward it and really have both mentors and sponsors in your life to get you there. And the other thing is women need to help each other and men need to help women as well find their voice and be heard. That's probably something that's one of the most critical. We're paid to have opinions and we're paid to have ideas.
Marianne, thanks for that really thoughtful comments. Really appreciate it. Emmy, back to you. When you think of new business models, creating new go-to-market strategies, how can people think more effectively or productively in that space?
I think that something that has been tremendously positive right now is that given the fact that consumers are not on the store, or given the fact that consumers are not interacting directly in the physical places, some brands have awoken to the reality that you have to get close to your consumers regardless. And in terms of new business models, I think the great opportunity that many brands have now is first to really observe the changes in consumer behaviors and consumer expectations and how our consumers are expecting another level of accessibility with the services, of different dynamics in the behavior and how the brand behaves with them in terms of customer service, and to create services that are up to those standards. Very often we hear that regardless of the industry, a company compares themselves to the direct competitors without realizing that the consumers are not comparing yourself to necessarily to your competitors only. They're also comparing you to Uber and Facebook and Airbnb and things that are outside your industry that are setting their expectations on how a service should be. And I think the best way to start creating new business models and really start creating a whole different way of engaging with your consumers starts by putting the consumer at the center and really understanding what are their expectations for your service. And that will set you free for sure.
It's really about inspiring a culture of reimagining new business models, right?
Yeah, and curiosity. I was paying attention to what Marianne was saying and Sigal was saying even at the beginning in her career. And I think curiosity in us, in individuals, in professionals, is key to develop a good career, right? And a professional career and a thriving career. The same for corporations. The culture of curiosity has to be embedded everywhere, in everyone. And brands need to be curious about their consumers, and brand needs to be curious about their employees, and they need to foster curiosity everywhere, in every area, to really thrive.
My friend on the upcoming panel, Mark Polanski, talks about life being a lifelong learner. Paul, you must be a lifelong learner. I mean, to be at your level in this industry, you've been at it for a long time, like we all have on this panel.
Yes, I have. I was in the financial services industry for 15 years, was a part of a lot of large transformational programs, and you learn a lot. You really do. One of the things that was quite powerful was understanding what was really the single vehicle that stimulated transformational programs and allowing them to be successful. And what I determined was, and I think Marianne touched on this in terms of describing leadership, is that a leader's responsibility is to define reality. That's the very first thing they need to do. So when you look at a large transformational program, what is impacting the success of that program? And it is making sure that all those people that are part of that program go on that journey, and they're all part of the process. They're not brought in at the end of the day when things have been decided. You have to empower them to deliver that transformational program. And then coupled with that, what I discovered over the years was how we purchased infrastructure. We needed to purchase infrastructure the same way that we sold our services. So acquire services, buy services the same way you sell services. And by creating that happy marriage, it creates the ability to make navigational turns and changes when you're in a complex transformational program. The days of buying capital and hoping that it's adopted, those days are over. With the usership economy, you deploy infrastructure, and as you make navigational turns and changes, you're paying at the pace of innovation, and you're paying at the pace of that transformational program. So you're better able to manage your overall costs and control your risks. So I've learned that over the years.
Yeah, do you help your clients then reimagine their whole data center strategy?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the...
So in fact, you help reimagine the data center strategy with Pure.
Absolutely. We reimagine not only how you would go about embarking on a business or digital transformation, but the very way that the infrastructure is actually delivered, designed, and built, and then paid for. So there's a happy marriage across the organization. The key is to free up your cash so you're not investing it in things that are not being adopted. And you have the ability to then leverage the cash that you normally would have invested in that infrastructure to do all the other things that you always wished you could do, that cyber program, that cloud program, that AI program. That's really the key, is to get more use out of your dollar.
Love it. Paul, how can people get in touch with you or Pure?
You can reach out to me, paul.ferraro@purestorage.com, and also LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect with all the panelists. That'd be wonderful.
Excellent. Paul, thanks for coming on the program today. Great job.
Thank you.
Hey, Sigal, we're in the process at HMG launching a Women in Technology Global Summit. It's kind of new, relatively news off the press. Maybe you and Marianne would want to be involved.
Would love to. I've been very passionate for women in technology. I'm sitting on the board of the National Center for Women in Information Management. So I'll be very, very happy to be part of that.
Excellent. Excited to make that happen. Thanks for coming on the program today, Sigal.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And Marianne, final word or final comment?
I guess I would say, really take this moment to be able to build leadership in a very personal way with people and build the trust and always give them the big picture and have them focused on the why and know what your competitors are doing. and so that everyone can feel they're part of a community and they can make a difference.
Marianne, great job. Thanks for coming on the program today. Appreciate it. Emmy, final word?
Again, I think it's a time for a new wave of innovation. I really believe that brands are there now with all these new behaviors in the companies, and I'm really, really excited to see that curiosity within innovation thrive, that collaboration to really augment in our cultures, and to really see new products and services that are relevant for this time in our history, for sure.
Excellent, Emmy. And how can people get in touch with you?
I'll put an email on the chat, emmy@globant.com, and we'll be in contact.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on the program. Thanks for supporting today's summit. Great job.
Thank you, Hunter.
Excellent. Okay, next up is the industry search executive update. Why don't we bring Tony Lang. Tony, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Hopefully you can hear and see me okay here in sunny California.
Where are you in California now?
I'm in Northern California. I'm in a little village up in the wine country where I live, and now I kind of work permanently almost.
So Tony and I, we've been collaborating now going on 14 years, based in the Valley, perhaps one of the best network search execs, I say west of the Mississippi. Also does board work. You were formerly a CEO of a publicly traded company. What are you seeing out there now for the CIO tech leader?
Well, I look at three different things. One, this whole COVID-19 has thrust the CIO into what I call being deeply involved in the corporate strategy roadmap. IT has saved a bunch of companies. CIOs now have a huge voice on the senior leadership team. Business models are changing. The future of work is being addressed by IT. That's one. Two, well, technology strategy roadmap. It started quite a long time ago, hopefully, and heroes and villains are being exposed, but it's about modern architectures and separating, data being the fuel for digital. Everyone wants Apple front end, Amazon back end, everybody wants that world. And then the third piece is the people roadmap. We heard from Sigal and Marianne, Emmy, and Paul talking about things that Mark and I will cover a little bit more in the future. But frankly, the leadership agenda kind of has slightly changed. Leadership is still crucial, but the way you lead, the methodology of leading, I think has changed, and let's unpack that going forward.
Excellent, Tony. Thanks for sharing. Hey, Mark, we've been collaborating together for over 20 years. You've been in several of my books. Great professional and personal friend and guide and a coach.
Thank you.
Give us an update. What are you seeing out there?
Well, that's the question du jour, Hunter. Some of you may know I've collaborated with Hunter on many of these events and several recently. And until about 2 weeks ago, I said, all right, I'm going to kind of do stuff around the house and other hobby kinds of things, and I'll wait till fourth quarter because it looked like search was being put off until the end of the year. Certainly during the 3 months of the lockdown itself, Tony and I saw a dip in business. And my clients were saying, we just don't have the bandwidth. It's not a question of money. We just don't have the bandwidth now to focus on a search. We're focused on survival, on cash preservation, on keeping our people engaged and happy and well and connected, of course. And so, okay, we'll see in the fourth quarter. But in the last couple of weeks, the skies opened up, much as it has in the stock market. And I'm not trying to predict one from the other or even align them in any way. But in the last 2 weeks, so much of that pent-up demand from the previous 3-4 months has come to the surface, plus a whole bunch of new stuff. So I'm busier now than I probably was throughout all of 2019. And so this is a great time for Tony and me, and it's a great time for people who are looking as well. So the demand is up, and so will the supply. So I have a quick one. Nikki, could you put up my poll, please? I have a personal poll going with my friend Nikki Frederick. And the poll is around willingness, openness to consider new opportunities. Now, today, compared with pre-pandemic, are you much more likely to change jobs, somewhat more likely, about the same, or somewhat less likely, or much less likely? And let's get the answers, and we'll bring the answers back later in this segment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Hey, Steve, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Hey, Hunter, how are you? And first, I have to say hi to Mark. I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't say hi before our pre-call because I thought you weren't going to be on this, so I wasn't looking for you. So good to see you.
Same.
How you doing, Hunter?
Yeah, great. Good to see you. What are you seeing out there as well?
You know, it's funny. I'm going to dovetail off of what Mark said. I've been on. I was on a stretch of about 5 or 6 in a row of the weekly panels, which have been great. I've been, you guys have been first movers on this. There was about a 2-week lull. And my thematic during those first couple of weeks were, I wrote a piece right before COVID, unity of effort wins the day in cyber. And for everybody, I'm a cyber guy, so I'm the token cyber guy on this CIO panel here, so forgive me. And then I kind of dovetailed that with unity of effort wins the day in cyber and COVID. And just unity of effort, it's a military operating term, maneuver warfare type term, and for purposes here, it's just kind of raising collaborative necessity and collaboration across the organization and with your external partners to a just far greater degree, kind of to do what it takes to get it done, do it well, in the right way, of course. And so that's been going on. The CISO is the beacon of light across the organization. I mean, really, you look at, what Brett Arsenault at Microsoft did, turn around 100% remote workforce. It was supposed to be 3 months. I think he did it in 36 hours. Things like that. But kind of, and then, recognizing these emerging leaders that we really think about as leaders before, this really, this has been maneuver warfare, battle the companies have to do, as we as a nation have to do, but really companies had to do. And these surprise leaders and recognizing those. So that was the thematic. I think what I'm seeing now, though, is in addition to, it's been funky. I'm getting called left and right, not just pure play search, but can we do benchmark assessments? Can we kind of look at the staff? I've helped flow in third-party consultants to do complete risk mitigation assessments across the enterprise, and kind of GCing that, if you will. So that's really interesting. But what I'm seeing is we're kind of now in the new. I mean, it's here. It's time to kind of, carry on and stop talking about what we're going to do, and folks are getting on with it. And what I think what's kind of come around is companies and leaders have found their operating rhythm. Again, it's a kind of military term. Again, I use it here often. Your operating rhythm, kind of how we're going to kind of work day to day in this new operating environment. Part of that, as well as not working 24/7 as well, because this is where it's at. I mean, and so a lot of interesting kind of scenarios along that. So it's just been a very interesting, I'll agree with Mark, these kind of the initial 3 months, maybe 3.5 months to these past 3 or 4 weeks, we kind of gone through that door now, and we're kind of just getting on with it. We, the collective, the collective community here.
Steve, thanks. I love the military wartime kind of analogy or metaphor. I thrive on that as well.
I don't usually pick them out, but they're very appropriate here. I try to stay away from them, but it is what it is right now.
Well, it got pretty ugly and scary. I think the sell-off and then the rebound in the equity market was unprecedented. It only happened one other time in all of the history of the markets. Tony, you talk about heroes and villains. You want to give us a little on that?
Well, I think that the heroes are the people who probably prepared and started doing the work 2 or 3 years ago, and they were able to really enable their companies to make things happen. The villains didn't. But I think this, it's fundamentally a leadership issue, and we've heard from some great leaders today, vision, boldness, courage, deliberate calm, bounded optimism. But I think the real kind of, my new favorite question, let's call it, is what did you do, as COVID hit? Because nobody knew. This is a situation that there was no game plan, there was no predefined roadmap, and anybody who said, yeah, I had this down, this is what I did, this is exactly the plan, frankly, is bullshitting. Because the old method of leading, which is kind of top down, I got it, you and you do this and that, I think that's in the past. There's been a huge acceleration around technology, but I believe there's been a huge acceleration in leadership. And the new model is like a circle. The leaders in the middle, and what's now required, frankly, is sort of vulnerability, authenticity, inclusiveness, making people feel safe, included, heard, and the leader doesn't know it all. The leader relies on, empowers, and works within the team to make stuff happen. There's a word that I'm using called adaptive resilience. It's like a fire flame. An unresilient flame gets blown out. Too resilient, this kind of I know it all, doesn't flex, kind of adapt, have, the malleability that's required to adapt into these new circumstances. So I think leadership is still a big thing, but there's certain traits that are now being accentuated, and these new traits are really positive. And Sigal talked a bit about D&I. That's the new complexity that's being added to all of this. COVID, Amy Cooper, George Floyd, demonstrations, kind of, are the leaders being sensitive to the events of our time, and are they building inclusive teams going forward? I think that's a huge new agenda point.
Very well said. Would you agree? Probably the most challenging and exciting time to be a tech leader, Tony?
This is massively challenging. You no longer can be the technically most competent person to be successful. You now need to combine that with these additional leadership skills that I mentioned. This is what makes, the CIOs great, and potentially great overall leaders of business.
Thanks, Tony. Hey, Mark, let's pivot off of that or extend that idea. What's the difference between a good and a great CIO in the boardroom, in the C-suite, in the line of business?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to pick up on something Tony said, and I'm going to use the word adapt, because our research done by our Korn Ferry Institute, our not-for-profit R&D arm, says that if we can disrupt companies, business models, if we can disrupt entire industries, and here's a new one, if we can disrupt entire countries, think of India, why can't we just simply disrupt ourselves? And disrupting ourselves means being able to adapt, being able to pivot, being able to intake new discovery that we've never seen before, as in a pandemic, and be able to communicate a vision and a purpose and rally the troops. And that's one of the biggest pieces of leadership for me, is the ability to create followership. And we test that when we interview in our own way. But this ability to adapt is super, super important. And it's not a skill. Being adaptable, being agile, it's not a skill, it's a trait. Traits are not learned the way skills are learned. They are acquired by folks adjusting their mindset and putting a mindset on that will be adaptive, that will be self-disruptive, that will change with times and come up with the right solution in whatever comes at them. But that's the key leadership point here now. And Hunter, you mentioned a couple of moments ago about lifelong learning. The Institute also says the single most common denominator in great leaders is lifelong learning and constant self-improvement. So if you're not reading, if you're not going to courses, if you're not dialed into all the HMG events, if you're not doing the right things to keep up and to continuously be self-improving, you're missing a big part of what you could be.
Excellent, Mark. Thanks so much. Hey, Steve, do you want to jump on that as well? Lifelong learner?
Yeah, no, and again, for the audience, if you've seen me before, I'm a former Marine guy. I'm an operator at heart. I don't really kind of focus, but this conversation allows for just, because battle is about operating in a fluid, fog of war, unknown environment, and the winners are the people who bring their troops back and get the mission done and bring their troops back. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. Tony said something about winners and losers, and I've been thinking this for a long time, but I didn't want to say it during kind of the heart of kind of where lockdown, but. For a while now, digital transformation, I've been hearing it for 10 years and, absent the small local companies, but regional or big players, I just don't understand how you weren't kind of already down the path on this, but if it had to take COVID to give you a kick in the butt to kind of get on it, so be it. But, again, this is the new. It's not kind of what we did yesterday. This is new. Get on it. Stop talking about yesterday. One thing we should be doing all now, once we kind of get, settling into our operating rhythm is, do a critique of kind of where we could have done things better. There's always room for improvement there. I'm not talking about just, it's not beat up yourself. It just kind of, it's what pilots do after every mission. It's what we do in the Marine Corps when we come back from even just a training mission. It's kind of what we should be doing here. So we don't repeat those mistakes. God forbid if there's another pandemic, what have you, but we learn from them. And, Mark said constant learning. That's what it's about, learning from this. Nobody had the answers here. It's interesting as well. And I'll wrap up on this. The leadership aspect has just been critical. And again, not just from the CEOs down, but I was it was a kind of closed session. Yes, I wasn't leading. I was on the panels listening to about 5, top level cyber CEOs. And the last question was kind of what's your leadership style now, COVID? And a lot of it hasn't changed, but, the things I've been hearing about transparency, empathy, communication. And, it's funny, 3 years ago when we were doing these panels, if you asked me that, and I would say those same things, the audience would be kind of, oh yeah, okay, I don't really think about empathy is in terms of kind of leadership. But guess what? Today, everybody gets it. Empathy is part and parcel of it. It's just, and if you maybe missed out on that, well, get with it and figure out kind of why that works, because it really does work. It's a different paradigm that we're living in now. It's not going to go back. So I'll leave you with that.
Hey, Hunter, we got a minute to look at the poll results.
Absolutely.
Nikki, can you post those to the screen? So only 18% are less likely to look for a new role than before, but some 70% or thereabouts would be at least as open to considering new opportunities. And there's a whole bunch of people that would be somewhat and even much more likely. Now that top line, that much more likely line, has been going up over the last couple of weeks. I've been watching the numbers, but that's a big number. 70% of you out there are at least, if not more, ready to take a call from Steve or Tony and me. And you should all know that the demand is there for you. So whenever you're ready, let us know.
Hey, Mark.
Hunter, do we have time for a second? Can I ask Mark?
Sure.
Mark, is that because folks aren't satisfied with what they went through at their company, or they just think there's greener grass on the other side?
Some of it is situational. People bailing out of hospitality, people bailing out of certain consumer-oriented models that are just going to be tough. We've seen a lot of flow out of the airlines too. And the rest is, hey, my company did not do well during the pandemic, and they're not listening to me, and they're not reacting to racial injustice. That's a new big one. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, but to pick up on that point, you know, cultures are being defined and refined. People can have an espoused culture, but boy, COVID has absolutely exposed whether that's really in the DNA of the business or not. So as Mark says, yeah, there's some industries that are in trouble. Others have this espoused culture, but it's not being lived out in reality. And, you know, that's causing people to rethink their world. And it's part of the leadership that you should be exhibiting within your organizations. Are you authentic? Are you real? Is what you say followed up by the actions you're taking, particularly around D&I and all the rest of it?
Hey, Tony, final word, and how can people get in touch with you?
Well, you know, you can get in touch with me, Tony Lang, tony.lang@divsearch.com. Final word is, boy, this is now the confluence of great leadership, you know, broad understanding of where technology is going, what it can do for the business, and being authentic enough to really make sure that you are building inclusive teams that have a diverse perspective.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony. Mark, final word, and how can people get in touch with you?
Let's keep it easy, LinkedIn, and I'll steer you over to email. I'm going to be a little redundant on my own words, and that is carve out some time, especially now if you've got some time on your hands and you're not commuting, repurpose that time into self-improvement. Pick up a book, go online, there's courses galore. You can always learn something that would be useful. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Mark. Steve?
My name is too long, too many vowels, so I'll just say Stanton Chase website, and I'll repeat myself from the opening. Unity of effort wins the day.
Excellent. Hey, Steve, thanks for being here. Mark, great to see you. Tony, always good to see you. Hopefully you can stay here till the end of the program. Next up, we have Securing the Future of Work with Rocco Grillo. Rocco, you going to introduce your Rockstar panel?
Great. Thanks, Hunter. Hi, everyone. Nice to speak to everyone, and thanks again for having me on HMG Live. My name is Rocco Grillo. I know many of you have had the fortunate pleasure of participating in other HMG events. I'm managing director with Alvarez and Marsal, oversee our global cyber risk incident response investigations. To Hunter's point, we've put together a Rockstar panel today. With us is Gulrez Jamadar from Citi. We've got Greg Krichenko from Guardian Life Insurance, as well as Mike Sawyer from Wells Fargo. I'm going to hand over to our panelists, but in a moment, what I'd like to just talk about is, to Hunter's point, the theme of our session is securing the future of the workforce. A tremendous amount of information was given so far. A lot of it overlaps into IT security, but if you see some of the things that we've experienced over the last 3 months, not so much just the last 3 months, but things like spikes in phishing attacks, ransomware, attacks on third parties, fraud, business email compromises, the list goes on. It's not so much that it's new, but it's rampant right now, especially as the workforce have been thrust from working in corporate organizations and environments into overnight and remote in the blink of an eye. To that end, and on those themes, I'm going to hand off to Gulrez. If you could give us a little on your background, Gulrez, and the theme of our topic, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Rocco. And Rocco, as you said, I think wonderful panel discussions and comments so far. I've been taking some pretty good notes as learning points as well. So Gulrez Jamadar, I am the Global Head for Information Security for the Institutional Clients Group at Citibank. I also have a dual responsibility in that I'm the Global Head for Technology Risk Management as well. So I do oversee both portfolios, and especially during these times, I think the duality of the role that I oversee has come in quite handy as I get to traverse the entire risk landscape when I think about not just information security, but technology risk in general. And then in Rocco, we will be talking about securing the work here. But the one observation I'll tell you from, at least from Citibank's standpoint, given the globality of our company, it's been an interesting eye-opener when you think about the COVID-19 situation, especially in the large sites that we have, and how do we actually deal with something of this scale. And quite frankly, it's really turning into a risk management. It's a business conversation, and I'm sure we'll touch on that. So I'll hand it back to you, and I guess we'll progress the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gulrez. Some great points. Mike, over to you.
How's it going, Rocco? Nice to see you again. And great panel and great conversations before. I've really enjoyed it. So, Mike Sawyer, I'm the global head of IT risk and controls for Wells Fargo consumer lending, merchant services, and credit cards in the first line. Have been around and worked in all three different lines, plus some startups and consulting, and have been in the game for a while. It's very interesting. You think you've learned a lot in your career, especially some of the senior folks that we have on, but this is kind of like back in some of my newer job days or Big Four, when you're just drinking from a fire hose and having to learn so many things and change the way of thinking. And I really feel like at the end of this, people are just going to become much more stronger at adapting and change management. And as Gulrez had said, risk management and business focus and client focus is really the name of the game. So it's really changed the way that I'm thinking personally about things. So it's been interesting for sure.
Great. Thanks for that, Mike. And last but not least, Greg Kuchenko. Thanks for joining us today, Greg.
Thanks, Rocco. Thanks for the opportunity, and been a great panel so far, and looking forward to talking with everybody. I'm Greg Kuchenko. I'm the Deputy CISO at Guardian Life. I head up cybersecurity services for Guardian Life, which covers a number of different technology areas, and we definitely have been challenged, but have been able to address and come to understanding how we need to help adjust things, both with the recent social unrest, as well as also the COVID experience. So we've been doing a lot of different things that have really challenged us a bit, but also been able to look to see how do we improve from there and how do we continue to get better. So as we continue to be strong leaders, we're always looking and being self-critical and how do we reassess and how do we reevaluate how we handle things. So really interested in participating on this panel. So, thanks, Rocco.
Great. Thanks for that, Greg, and all of you. I'm going to stay with you for a second there, Greg. I know we're tight for time here, and at the same time, this topic itself, we can talk for hours on it. But you and I have known each other for a while, interactions through different industry organizations, FSI, SAC, the list goes on. Without sharing too much, Greg, and we both travel, we both been in offices, remote, different offices across the country, globally in some instances. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen? As much as, like even I said at the top of the conversation, phishing's not new, fraud's not new, even nation state attacks. But in the midst of COVID, what are some of the things that you saw, some of the things that your team may have tackled, or just even things in the industry?
Great question. Yeah, Rocco. So we've been keeping a pretty close eye on what's happening. To what's the same type of attacks, but just different form factor. So we're seeing a lot of stuff on COVID-19. Different types of schemes of how to go ahead and do the traditional social engineering techniques that are commonly used. However, in this case, they're used more towards preying on people's fears at this point. So we've been taking these threats and really doing a good job of how do we communicate, how do we make sure that we make people aware, especially since people are more distanced now. Some of the chat that would happen earlier was not, was more directed. Now we're using alternative means like Yammer and some other internal social media ways to make sure that the message gets out to different folks. We've also been keeping a very close eye on our supply chain. We've seen a lot of uptick in ransomware recently, just from a supply chain management. Knocking on wood, we haven't seen anything on our end, but we continue to stay abreast of that and really focus on making sure our processes continue to stay sound and making sure that as we identify threats, we're able to, any indicators of compromise that we get, we're applying them to our various controls that we've put in place. So those are probably the three things that we've been focused on.
Thanks for that, Greg. And, one of the things, no doubt it's now more than ever, these issues aren't IT security issues for sure. It impacts the business disruption issues. And, Gulrez, I know, and a lot of the things that you do is obviously IT security and compliance, come into play. You mentioned earlier looking at things from a global perspective, but in communicating with the business and so forth, as much as there's all these different things, the term risk appetite continues to be thrown out there, and I see you chuckling a little bit there. Can you expand on that for us a little bit, and especially in your role? What's this opportunity given us, not only to the business executives, but the overall enterprise from a risk standpoint?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, actually, Rocco. So what I've seen, and I know maybe it's a multi-pronged response, because at the end of the day, you're talking about creating awareness with the business operations folks who are primarily trying to ensure that their operations remain at a critical volume and they can manage to that. But I think it's also coming down to how do you create awareness amongst the various stakeholders of the different, I would say, the elevation of operational risk. So primarily driven by the absence of managerial supervision or the absence of physical controls that you may have in captive environments. A lot of times people need to be sort of, you need to take them onto that journey of how things have evolved or how the risk has been elevated. And I think once you get to a point where there's an acknowledgement around the risk itself, because people tend to think about, okay, yes, it's COVID-19. Yes, we have people working remotely. What has really changed, right? And I think that discussion does need to happen. And I think the more proactive as a security practitioner or as an IT risk manager, the more proactive you are in engaging your partners into that conversation, the better outcomes you have. And I think I'll also address even from a home work standpoint, if you think about the global nature and some of our companies that are represented even on this panel, you have a global footprint, you have staff who have different skills as well as awareness around security, and more importantly, I would say capabilities in their home. So when you talk about, I may have like a 1 gigabyte line at home here, but somebody working in India or some other far from place may not. They may not even have the standard computer that we ought to be expecting. So I think when you get into a COVID-19 situation, very different things come into play. And I think it's really making sure that you think and engage partners from logistics, from physical security to technology risk, and making really sure that the awareness around the risk posture and how the risk has been elevated is coming into play and is at the forefront. Striking a balance between operational readiness as well as maintaining a level of security that's deemed acceptable.
Great points. Thanks for that, Gulrez. And Mike, I'm going to throw one to you that really combines with Gulrez and even Greg for that matter. We've been talking about the things that have occurred the last 3 months, how we're getting ourselves ready, how we've gotten ourselves not only stabilized but moving forward. But the very term and the theme of our session, the future of work. There's all these different pieces. A lot of even the threat vectors that I talked about earlier, they've been beaten to death. Every day we hear that phishing is through the roof, or the insider threat and things that continue to evolve. What's the future hold for us?
Yeah, thanks, Rocco. I think it's really interesting, and I'm sure most kind of realize this, but I think about it in two ways, and it could be a game changer. So in one word, decentralization of the workforce. And, I think a lot of us over the course of our careers in different companies, it always seems like whether you're, domestic or international, that you have certain areas that you can hire in. Oh, wait, now you can't hire. Oh, wait, now you can hire. But I think that's going to change, right? So working remotely has proven effective for most, right? Especially in financial services. Again, it doesn't seem to have kind of these locked in positions like you can hire, but only in these areas, or you can hire, but only for this kind of niche kind of product or service. So I think it's really going to open it up that people, security risk professionals, don't necessarily have to live next to a metropolis. And more importantly, you know, digital is on steroids now, I think, with most. Automation, machine learning, quantum computing, you know, to kind of, at first I noticed to kind of ramp it up so we can, you know, help with some of these decentralized efforts. But I think what that may do, and not to be a forecaster or a crystal ball, is that if you have these other things in place, you may open up the career for information security or risk professionals that necessarily aren't tenured in, you know, these types of experiences. So, you know, it may make it easier for other folks from other walks of life to step into these areas and opportunities. And maybe someday that'll help with the, you know, 4 to 6 million cyber openings that we always hear about. So I think it'll be interesting from a social perspective.
For sure, no doubt the need for talent continues to evolve, and some of the things I think we're all seeing, you know, whether it's embracing new technologies or this remote workforce, that whole idea that you have to be in a major city or reporting to a corporation. There's so much talent around the country globally that you know, in the blink of an eye, you've got, you know, access to. And I know we had the executive recruiter panel earlier. I'm sure they can speak volumes on that theme, that if people have the ability to work remote, it's incredible. And, you know, I'm going to shift over to you, Greg. I know, you know, especially on the themes of what Mike was talking about. Didn't mean to throw him into the middle there with the crystal ball, but from your perspective, I know you like that term, the hybrid approach, when we not even work from home, work from anywhere, work remotely. What are some of the things that you can expand on from that perspective as to where we're going with the workforce from a hybrid perspective?
Yeah, no, I think the ability to work from anywhere, you know, part of our journey, even at Guardian, has been to do more of a work from anywhere type of arrangement. So we've actually been practicing that for a couple of years now. Ever since Hurricane Sandy hit New York City pretty hard, we were definitely impacted. So we've been working on, you know, kind of the strategy around work from anywhere. And that's one of the things that we feel is potentially a game changer for us. So to Mike's point, you know, you can hire somebody from anywhere that has the right skill set at the right time, has really been beneficial to us. And I think that that's going to definitely, to Mike's point, be a game changer for how you hire and how we look at things in the future. You know, definitely keeping the risk lens on it, but also making sure that, you know, we've been working a lot on how do we form the right culture. Turning on the video camera has been a big thing to make sure that you have that interaction with folks, and making sure that we've been leveraging Teams as well as a platform to really be able to bring the collaboration together, which, you know, traditionally in the past, you know, doing things through just a text message or an email has not been as personal. But now, being able to turn on the cameras, have the conversations, be able to collaborate on a digital whiteboard has really been able to help change the game of what was, you know, once you had to be in a metropolis in order to really have that workforce. And now the fact that you can be distributed across multiple time zones and multiple geographies really, I think, can be a game changer to help move companies along.
Great points, Greg. And, you know, looking at things from a global perspective, like you had pointed out before, Gulrez, especially when you look at a company like Citi or companies that are the size of world-leading financial institutions, you've got employees in different parts of the world. From a regulatory and compliance standpoint, how do you stay up to speed, especially when we've gone to this work from anywhere, work remote? How do you manage to stay, you know, keep the employees compliant, following the standards and requirements we have in place?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is certainly a very slippery slope, right? I mean, I think given the complexity and you know, some of the challenges that we all face as part of even a normal BAU environment, let alone a COVID-19. So I think when we get into this, it really comes down to, you know, one of my mentors at Citi also, like, you know, when I talked about how do we actually get this the right way. And he said, look, you've got to make sure you hire the right people. And I think it goes without saying making sure that your management chain, as well as the people we are bringing in, we are doing the right diligence around it, right? And then the trust element that I know Sigal and some of the other folks talked about is as well. We do have an ability to monitor productivity in terms of, system and usage, etc. But that's only one indicator. At the end of the day, managerial conversations, speaking directly to staff, irrespective. And one thing I would say about Citi is, given the global nature, it has a huge advantage in the sense that for us, we don't make a distinction anymore. You could be having like 50 people on a call and folks from all over the world joining. So for us, it's almost like it doesn't really matter that boundary. So for us, it's more about how do you have and maintain that line of sight. And then it comes through, I would say, direct conversations, a little bit of more, I would say, now in this day and age of COVID, believe it or not, more Zoom calls, making sure that we have a more of a off the Citi, I would say, work schedule, like a small get together with small teams, etc., just to make sure that people are in sync and we have that face time with them. So I would say a number of things, Rocco, I think, but it clearly is a challenge. It does require quite a bit of sustained effort.
For sure. Great points, Gulrez. And on that theme, as much as, throughout, not only our session, the overall summit, we've talked about the work remote and focused on the employees. But Mike, I know in your role, third-party risk management, the suppliers, the vendors, and so forth, they fit right there with the employees, because as much as they've got their contractual obligations and so forth, when government regulations come down that you're shut for business, it really has put third-party risk management, and I shouldn't say so much into a tailspin, but definitely needs further attention. What are your thoughts there, Mike?
Yeah, I think this was part of kind of the newer practices, the focus on third parties, because as Greg was saying, in addition to, concentration risk and supply chain, from myself and peers and friends in the industry, it just seems like it's a lot more focused lately, or maybe it has a renewed focus. It's always important, right? But that not only the third, but the fourth, the fifth person kind of in the chain. And I've noticed that it's not just necessarily a security assessment where, you hire a consultancy firm or someone from information security or risk goes on site, because you could go on site, but no one's there, right? So that's kind of been an interesting thing as well. So the regulators definitely expect it, as they should. But it's kind of we're seeing a little bit more virtual assessments using tool sets. It's going to be interesting, say, in a year or two, hopefully, if things flip back, when they flip back to normal, will the on-site assessment be as prevalent as it once was? And how's that going to change things just from a confidence level? And I really think, Rocco, we've known each other for years, but I really think the concentration risk, the supply chain as a whole, will really start to get past that third or fourth step. I know that's been kind of the mission in the, in that industry forever, but I think this really puts a light on it.
No doubt. And, even on that theme, I don't want to get myself in trouble from a PCI or QSA standpoint. Going and doing those kind of assessments akin to third-party risk management, there's the on-site element to it. And I know the PCI councils are looking at those requirements for companies that have to undergo things of that nature. But as much as we talked about our employees, we talk about the third-party service providers, the theme of insider threat. They're not the theme of insider threat isn't always a malicious employee. By contrast, we can almost zero in on who the malicious employees are. But the big exposure comes into these employees. By and large, all of our employees want to do well by the company. Likewise, so do our third-party service providers. Greg, on that thought, in the middle of this, when we talk about insider threat, what can companies be doing to really enhance their insider threat programs to take it to the next level, especially as it relates to the pandemic?
Yeah, I think great question, Rocco. I think the big thing for us is rethinking about our insider threat program. Initially it was more you were in the office space. Now there's different factors that play into where people may be having loss of financial money's coming in, or things where somebody has some type of issue or problem against the corporation. So we've recently kind of pushed the reset button and are looking at different user behavior patterns that are different from what we traditionally looked at before. So we look at COVID as as an opportunity now to see how do we transform our ways of thinking, using use case that we have, but then let's enhance them a little bit more where everybody's distributed and being remote as opposed to being in the office, where some of the controls that you had in place were different. So it's building a better mousetrap to be able to trap for those types of conditions.
Great point, Greg. And I know we're running short on time, but Gulrez, if you could give us a closing point, and Mike, that would be great, and being conscious of time. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, we are certainly living in interesting and challenging times. But it comes down for us as security practitioners and IT risk practitioners to really be an advocate and an advisory to our partners. And I know we use this term often that we need to be advisors and so on. But I think given these climates or these situations, I've seen personally firsthand proactively reaching out and working with partners across the board, across many lines of defenses, right? Whether it's compliance, regulators, or audit, etc., making sure that everyone understands and converges on what that risk actually means to the organization and getting them to understand and in fact appreciating different points of view in terms of what this risk actually is or how it could be, how it could manifest in different ways and means. And I think as long as we have that open line of communication across the teams and bridging those conversations, I think will get us to a much healthier space in terms of risk advocacy and risk management. And I think that to me is like really the key thing, especially in these times when we are not face to face, but having these conversations, keeping those lines of dialogue open with all these different layers of controls and across the organization, I think is key.
Fantastic. Mike, wrap us up.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. Thanks, Gulrez. I think, communication, teamwork, someone mentioned it before. I in my corporate career, not to say anything negative about some of the other companies because they've all been great, but I've never really felt more sense of purpose or community, right? And I think it goes back to what another speaker had said before. It's very interesting, or it's fun, to hang out with someone after work. But when you spend time with someone in their home and you see their kids, grandkids, pets, their living environment, right? So that really ingenuates you to each other as a team. And then you have this big focus, which everyone is in the boat rowing towards, right? So there are some, I think, positive things that will generate out of this. And right now, everyone's really focused on the big prize and to get through this, and not only to get through it, but to be better after it. That's kind of the feeling.
Fantastic. Greg, Mike, Gulrez, thanks so much. You guys have been awesome. I wish we had the whole afternoon to expand on this. But to that end, Hunter, I see you there, and over to you, my friend.
Great job. Thanks, Gulrez. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mike. Rockstar job.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys, thanks so much for showing up and being part of the summit. Thanks, Rocco. Next up, Gary Sorrentino. Gary's the Deputy CIO for Zoom and has had an amazing financial services background, spanning some 3 or 4 decades. In the last 14 years with JP Morgan Chase. Gary, great to have you here today.
Great, thanks for having me. Always a great topic to talk about.
Hey, boy, you guys have been busy. What an amazing ride you have been on at Zoom. Congratulations on the success. I know Eric was written up as one of the top 25 CEOs to watch in Barron's over the weekend. What an amazing recognition, well-deserved. When you think of the workforce is undergoing amazing transformation now, advice would you give business leaders as they think about leading in this hybrid market and then hybrid model, and then eventually some kind of a split model between working from home and working at work?
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of great commentary. I was fortunate enough to hear the last panel, so that was great. But I do think some of the things as we're talking to different companies about is really taking lessons from what happened. I think we did a great job communicating with people at the beginning as best we could. Along the way, though, I don't know if we actually took into, there are going to be work-life challenges. People are stressed in a different way than before. It was stressed from being away from family. Maybe now it's actually stressed from being with family all the time. And so work-life challenges are going to be there, and we need to listen to what they're telling us, but they're not actually just telling us. I think work-life balances are going to change. I think people are going to start to figure out, okay, I need to make some rules. I need to set down some of my own standards. I need to figure out, I'm not always running when I hear that bing on email or chat or the Zoom call at 10 o'clock at night. I think we're still going to be stuck with home challenges. You know, we're all talking about internet. We're all talking about home computers, things like that. But we're going to go through a change going forward. Right now, in most cases, both partners are probably home with the kids. Everybody's great. Pretty soon, one partner might go back to work part-time. One child might or might not go back to some sort of daycare, depending on where we are in the United States. We are going to mix up what's happening now. And I think that you heard everybody talk about hybrid, but we're also going to see the hybrid at home. I also think that they need to think about these work schedules because people are now going to have to adjust. If one partner goes back to work, I might not be able to do everything I need to do in the morning, and I might be under childcare for the morning. So that's going to change. Some of the stronger companies, they're really sitting down and looking at each job and saying, okay, where does this job need to be performed? Let's just not, you know, what we saw a lot of people who moved in to this pandemic and they went home and they did it three ways. I think some said, no, I'm not going to do all this video stuff. Some said, let's create the physical virtual. Some said, let's improve. And those companies really moved forward. I think as we move back, companies that are sitting down, reevaluating, not just seeing how many people we can get back to work, but how many of the right people we can get back to work. And what is the situation? I think one of the things they're not considering is employees have a choice. And where I might have at one time been the type or the demographic of an employee that wants to work in an office, I might not be that employee anymore. I might be different. I might want to move out of New York City and move to the suburbs now because I'm not going to work every day. Reduce my taxes, reduce my, increase my commute, but I'm not going to work every day. But we're tired of living in a four-room apartment. And if this ever happened again or long term. I also think that leaders are going to have to think about their middle managers. Think about this. The middle management had a way of managing while walking around. But we can't walk around anymore. And you can't constantly just Zoom people 30, 40 times a day. And you're going to really have to figure out, how do I change my style so that they changed? And I think one of the lessons here is keep your employees engaged. Keep them engaged the whole time. Over-communicate, over-listen. Take in what they're saying, but don't make it fit the model you want. You might have to change the model.
Thanks, Gary. When you think of financial services institutions, how will they use products like Zoom in the future and right now?
I think they're going to have to reestablish their culture over products like Zoom. Think about this. It was, what do we used to call them? Hallway collisions, human collisions, bumping into people, discussing things ad hoc on the way to get lunch and things like that. We don't have those abilities right now. And so culture comes from people having good communications, and we're missing that. And I think that they're going to have to figure out a way to how to use some of the products like Zoom and other products and figure out how to instill culture, how to get what the new employees want, because you got to almost look at it as these are all new employees, new views coming back. And how do we keep that culture going? I think products like Zoom, we saw a lot of one-to-one to one-to-manys. I mean, we can actually see at the beginning, pre-COVID, there were a lot of one-to-one calls. Now we're seeing many calls. I mean, we went from 10 million active participants daily to 300 million, but it wasn't because there were so many more one-to-ones. There were larger calls. There were a lot more webinars and things like that. So I think video is going to play a strong role, especially in the financial community. And I think they have to be challenged to use it for a couple of things. How am I using it to keep in touch with my employees? And we keep talking about the way the employees want to work. But how am I going to use it to be in touch with my clients because the clients have changed the way they want to work? And we need to look at both of those very seriously before we start moving forward.
Interesting time, right? Culture really matters. Any tips on how to really build and accelerate the culture in this work from home scenario?
I think they need to listen to the employees. They really need to enable the way employees want to work. They need to sit down with them. And to tell you the truth, not all the employees know how they want to work going forward. So I think really it's about how do we sit down with them, educate them, figure out how they want to work. And once we figure out how they want to work, how does that fit into the way we want to work as a company? I think we have to learn another way of embracing employee values. We can't put people in buckets anymore. I'm clearly not a millennial, but my views have changed. And I now have a lot of millennial views when it comes to where I'm going to work and how I'm going to work. The other things we need to do is we need to set boundaries. And when I mean boundaries, when we say in a company, we are not going to send chat out at 1 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's got to do that, because when someone hears that bing and it's to a team and the one team member answers it and everybody else follows the rules, they feel like they're disadvantaged. That doesn't help the culture. And so I think people need to set boundaries. We had one interesting story about a CEO. He set up a very large webinar. It was probably everybody in the company, 90 minutes. And everybody blocked their calendar. He sent out a note. We will block our calendar from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. Everybody, very important webinar. Everybody gets on this huge webinar. And all he said was, there's no webinar. Go hug your kids. Do something. I want you to do nothing for 90 minutes related to business. And I know you have the calendar blank. But what he did is he set precedents about, I'm trying to change the culture. I'm trying to make it so that we give you the time you need to decompress and deal with family and things like that. That was a great symbol, right, of how leaders need to think about things like this.
You know, Gary, we at HMG had a great experience innovating our go-to-market over Zoom in this distributed environment. And it forced us to think differently and to think really full on digitally, that we were a digital broadcasting company, organization, medium. Any thoughts on how that kind of change helps people think more creatively and interrelate more creatively?
Well, you know, thanks. I was part of your journey, so I appreciate that, right? And we talked about it along the way. And you guys have come up with a great venue now to keep communities connected, which is important now, and keeping us leaders talking. So I think that's really, so bravo to you. But at the end, it wasn't everybody. I help a lot of companies, and it wasn't everybody that just dives in day one and says, yeah, let's go this way. They have to realize that these new enabling technologies, the technologies that are going to enable people to move forward, they need to start to learn to embrace, be very adaptive to technology. But they also need to look for technologies that are going to work the way they want to work, not fight them to work a different way. You know, there's some technologies out there, you open it up and you start working, and I think Zoom is one of them. You don't need a lot of instructions. Yeah, you'll learn along the way. There are better ways to use it. But mom, 90 years old, Zooms me, right? Got to give her a lot of credit, right? She knows how to push the button, and she knows when I don't answer what to do. And now she has other people to Zoom. And so we are looking for those very flexible applications. And I like to label those under enabling technology.
Well, that's an amazing story Eric has in his whole journey in building this platform. Any comments on the culture at Zoom and how you folks continue to innovate to delight your clients?
So the culture at Zoom is always about the employees and the clients. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we make them, and our byline is how do we make them happy, and I like to add successful. So how do we work with the clients and listen to the employees at the same time? One of the things where, as you know, I'm also on their CISO, I run their CISO council, and the voice of the client is very, very strong. We continue to listen to our clients because there's no better person to ask about how a product should work than the people actually using it. And we use it internally, but it's great when, whether it's in financial services or in healthcare or in EDU, when they come up with another way to use the product or another functionality that we can build in. We're seeing workforce automation. We're seeing a lot of good ideas about how we make Zoom work in this new hybrid world. And I know the gentleman before talked about the hybrid world, and the hybrid world is going to be difficult. You know, the world is good at binaries. Everybody works online, everybody works on site, that works. Everybody's home, that works. What happens when you mix it up? You know, this is a great conference. What did someone say? All of our heads are the same size in a webinar or in a Zoom meeting. Right. But when you change that, and there's 5 people in one window together, and then everybody else is remote, how are we going to get over that hybrid syndrome? And so I think that's something Zoom is working on, and look for great things in the future from us.
Hey, Gary, thanks for coming on the program, and thanks for Zoom being such a great national partner of HMG's. And this event today was brought to you by Zoom, so thank you.
And thank you for being a great partner also. Thank you so much.
Yeah, how can people get in touch with you or anyone at the company? What's the best?
I'm easy. I'm Gary.Sorrentino at zoom.us. Just drop me a note.
Great. Hey, Gary, thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
So, folks, another amazing event here. Probably our 8th Financial Services Summit now in 8 years. I'm proud to say probably the strongest summit in the financial markets, covering leadership, innovation, disruption, reimagining, and reinventing the customer journey. A big shout out to our partners, Commvault, Globant, Illumio, Pure Storage, Zoom, our association partners, NPower, and SIM Metro New York. It's been great. Hopefully you really enjoyed today's program. Please tell your friends about what we're doing here at HMG. Stay engaged. I would think we will have another Financial Services Summit within about 3 months. And again, thanks to all the presenters, Tony, Steve, and Mark. You guys were great, brilliant as always. And stay in touch. Take care now. Be safe.